All right, Shalom Alechem, Erev Tov, good evening. I'm happy to finally be back. The schedule for the summer is that I'm back for this Monday and next Monday, and then B'ezrat Hashem, the following Monday, I'll already be heading out with my family to Eretz Yisrael for 3 weeks, B'ezrat Hashem. For those of you who will be in Israel at any time in that time period, we're going to celebrate the wedding of our dear friend Itai to Sophie. But B'ezrat Hashem, for those of you who are there, would like to meet in Yerushalayim, go to Har HaBayit, I would love to take whoever would like to go pray in Har Beit Hashem together with us. B'ezrat Hashem Yitbarach. We left off last time in the middle of extracting halachot from the book of Shemot as preparation for the laws of Sanhedrin of Rabbeinu Rambam, while dabbling in the laws of Sanhedrin of Rabbeinu Rambam. Today's shiur is going to touch on a different element of Mishpat Tzedek that I'm certain will make some of us feel less comfortable than others. And because of that, I wanted to perhaps share a little hagdama, a slight introduction. On my desk today was a book from Elie Wiesel, and my son Elchanan asked me who Elie Wiesel was. We had a conversation about World War II and the Holocaust and Nazis and after the Holocaust. I mentioned the Kehillat on Shabbat. The Holocaust was one of the greatest Chilul Hashems in human history. A desecration of God's name. Don't catch me in what other people use the word Chilul Hashem as. The prophet says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu ultimately will redeem Am Yisrael from the Goyim, from the nations of the world, because of the desecration of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's name that happens when the Jewish people exist there. The fact that somebody could kill 6 million children of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and get away with it, and nothing happens to them, is a Chilul Hashem of unbelievable proportions. HaKadosh Baruch Hu has a chosen people, and those chosen people can be rounded up and slaughtered and tortured and destroyed. En oneh, en potzepe, en mitzafzef. Nothing happens in the world. The world just keeps going. That is a terrible Chilul Hashem. There were some people that tried to take the edge off of the Chilul Hashem. One of those people was a famous man by the name of Simon Wiesenthal, who was known as a great hunter of Nazis in HaShamayim. He himself lost close to 90 members of his family in the Holocaust. And he spent the rest of his life trying to bring the murderers to some form of justice. And they once asked him, what is your motivation? Is it justice or is it revenge? And he would reply, revenge. Who could even conceive of the type of revenge that would be befitting for the murder of millions of people? You want to do take revenge. How would you take revenge? What tools do you possibly have to exact revenge against Nazis? And justice? He said the best that we can do is to pursue a measure of symbolic justice. Since it is impossible to give each and every victim what they truly deserve, their own day in court. The closest you can bring to the world is symbolic justice. There was a famous Pan Am flight that was hijacked, bombed. Some 250 people, more maybe, lost their lives in that bombing. I'm sure some of you remember that. And it ended up crashing down on a town in the United Kingdom, killing another 11 people that were there on the ground. Anyone familiar with the story? Yeah. They ended up discovering that it was Libyan nationals that were involved. Gaddafi and Makshama was involved in the story. They ended up arresting some people, letting some people go. Ultimately, one of the people they came to trial was the last name, I don't know how to pronounce the last name of Magrehi. They arrested him, they put him in prison. He ended up serving a sentence. In the middle of his sentence, He tried to appeal it once, tried to appeal it twice. In the middle of his second appeal, he was diagnosed with prostate cancer. And so he made an appeal to the Scottish court for a compassionate release. That was the legal mechanism in which they released him. Compassionate release back to his family, in which they sent him back to Libya. They ended up giving him medical treatment there, prolonging his life. Revolutions happened. They lost track of him for a little bit. The rest was history. But in the year 2009, this terrorist who brought hundreds of families crumbling to their knees because they lost their loved ones on what was supposed to be a routine flight, family travel, business travel, pleasure travel, they let him go as part of a compassionate release. Our HaShamayim, they teach us that kol hamerachem al ha'achzarim, anybody who is compassionate on those who are cruel, sovol hitachzer al harachamanim, will end up being cruel to those who deserve compassion. I'm not a judge. I'm definitely not a Scottish judge. I wasn't in the court case. I didn't review the evidence. But assuming that all of this is true, the man was a terrorist who killed other people's family members, what room is there for compassionate release? What about the compassion to the people? You're not going to bring back their family members. You're not going to bring back the people who, the flight attendants, the stewards, the pilots that were incinerated in air. But the little bit of closure that they had in their life, knowing that symbolic justice, in the words of Simon Wiesenthal, was at least taken, was in existence. Who gives you the right, on the grounds of compassion, to be compassionate to a terrorist and not to the victims of his terrorism? And that is something that every judge who sits in a court has to have imagining in front of their eyes, always. Every judge, when he or she sits in court, has to ask themselves the question, I want to be compassionate in justice. But when I'm compassionate towards the criminal, I end up being cruel to the victim. On the other hand, if I end up being compassionate to the victim, I can be overly cruel to the criminal, neither of which are correct. But sometimes there is what is in our terminology at least referred to as misplaced mercy. There's compassion that people have. It's a good thing that people have compassion. It's a wonderful thing that there are compassionate people in the world. When you meet a person who doesn't have compassion, it's one of the most terrifying people to speak with. In general, people who don't know how to share feelings of empathy, sympathy, compassion, they don't know how to show those feelings. It's terrifying because you don't know which level of humanity you are up against, what you're dealing with. I once heard a person tell somebody else, I love you. Another person said, okay. What a heartbreaking thing to put love in the air, I love you. And the person responds to you, okay. What do you mean? You can't elicit some kind of emotion back? Well, if you can't, then maybe we should have a conversation. Whether there really is love in the air, or the love that's in the air is imaginary. Hate is also an emotion. It's good to know when people hate us. I much prefer somebody who hates me publicly than somebody who pretends to love me and then behind my back stabs me. It's how Chacham Torah says, Lo tisna et achicha bilvavecha. Do not hate your brother in your heart. It's a separate prohibition from hating them overtly. It's hating a person covertly. Because I don't even know to defend myself from you. I don't know that you're my enemy. I thought you sit next to me in the Beit HaKnesset. You always tell me Shabbat Shalom. You ask how my kids are doing at school. And then I find out that you say the most horrible things about me. Mori harav, hareini kapat mishkavo. When I come back from Israel, already I won't say hareini kapat mishkavo. 12 months will have passed. And I will retreat to the blessing of Zecher Tzadik Livracha. Mori harav once had a girl come to him. A Beis Yaakov girl in Yerushalayim. Not a girl. I don't know why we use the word girl for women who are older. But she was single. So in the religious community, she gets called a girl. She's a young lady. She came to Peretz to speak about shidduchim. No matter what happens, no matter who suggests the shidduch, comes time to get ready to date, the shidduch always gets blown out of the water. She can't understand why. What do you tell a person like that? I don't know. Hara Peretz had wisdom. He said, give me your shidduch resume. Let me see it. And that's very unusual. Hara Peretz doesn't deal with shidduchim, didn't look at resumes, wasn't involved in this area at all. But she left, and the Rav decided that night to make phone calls as if he was checking into shidduchim for this girl. And he goes down the list, and have rabbis and teachers and principals and friends and all. Best friend of the girl. I used the word the girl again. It's really best friend. And they called his best friend. And this best friend says, "Oh, you want to date her? She's the worst person you can imagine. Any guy who'll date her is going to ruin his life." Da, 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 da. Turns out the shidduch is always derailed by her best friend. Her parents called this lady back. Turns out that in high school they were rivals. They had some real jealousy between them. And the best friend, even though she today got married and had children, she had it in her heart that she hated this friend of hers. And she just wanted to derail her life for years, for years, for years. She spent all of her energy and time doing everything she could to ruin her friend's life. And when this girl found out, she was shell-shocked. You're blindsided. How could it be the person that I thought was my best friend, the one that I go to when the shidduch doesn't work out, the one that I go to, the one that I sit by the wedding with, and she says, "Yemir Hashem, soon by you," all of that, that's the person who hurt me. It's a horrible feeling. My enemies, I know to be afraid of them. Do you remember the famous story? Our HaShamayim tell us a saying that King Yanai told his wife, he told her, "Don't worry about the Pirushim, because they are our enemies. Don't worry about the Tzedokim, because they're our friends. Rather, who should you worry from? Who should scare you? He's Ha'ari min Hatzivuim, from the heretics. She'osim, not heretics, the English word. Hypocrites. That's the word. Beware of the hypocrites. She'osim ma'aseh zimriim, u'mevakashim sachar kapinchas. They act like Zimri, but they want reward like Pinchas. There are bad people in our life. They lurk everywhere. They look like good people. They pretend to be our friends. They pretend to be good to us, but they're really bad people." One of the most important midot that a judge has to have is how to judge their emotions, how to weigh their emotions. When do I show compassion? When do I not? When do I do that which is right in my mind, but it might be wrong to somebody else? How do I weigh these things? And so this all comes practically in the court of law to an area of halakha. So if you open with me the Sephardi source sheet that we're doing together, it should say Shemot 23, maybe. You see that? It should be at the bottom of the Zoom invitation you got in the Google Classroom. So however you got here. And I'm looking at source 12. We have a mitzvat lo ta'aseh, which says, shelo lerachem al ani badin, not to have compassion on a poor person in judgment. Shenemar, like it says in the Torah, vidal, and a poor person, lo tedar berivo, do not favor him in his fight, in his cause. From here, we have to jump into the Mishneh Torah, chapter 20, halakha 4. You and I are going to have all of our lifetime to study together, Bezrat Hashem, the laws of Sanhedrin. We'll get there. But I'm jumping in between significant passages so that while we're preparing, we know kind of where the Rambam is going to take us in these conversations. Chapter 20 is one of the most fascinating chapters in the laws of Sanhedrin. We're going to discuss next week an entirely different section of it, the beginning of it. But I want to jump a little bit into chapter 20. Perhaps of great importance in this chapter are the halachot that surround rape and sexual assault in halakha. And when reading them at face value, they can frustrate a person to not properly understand what Jewish law says about these topics. But I'm skipping just past there to Halakha Dalit, Halakha number 4. In the source sheet, it's source number 13. Says Rabbeinu Rambam, Asur levedin lachus al hahoreg. It is forbidden for the bedin to have compassion towards the murderer. When you say compassion on the murderer, what might that include? We're obviously not talking about letting them off the hook completely, because they're murderers, so you're not going to let them walk. Rather, what does it mean, compassion?
Not to kill him.
Okay, so not to kill him. Someone argued that. So I'm with you on this. In any capacity, what Rachel is saying is to give him a lighter sentence than what he deserves. He deserves this sentence, to give him a lesser sentence. What's the logic behind giving the murderer a lesser sentence? The logic is, Shelo yomeru, they shouldn't say, Kvar neherag ze. Listen, this victim is already dead. Uma te'ala yesh baharigat ha'acher. If I'm going to kill ha'acher, the other one, what purpose is there now in killing two people? There's one death in the world. 2 deaths don't make the world any better. Have you ever heard such an argument before? You hear this all the time. What does it help to kill the murderer? That you want to add more injustice to the world? You hear people speak like this about all kinds of things. Says Rabbeinu Rambam, that's incorrect. V'nimtzeu mitrashelin baharigato. And they become great word for mitrashelin. Lax. I don't know a good English word for you. Shneimar, like they say. Say.
Not the correct way.
Litrashel. Okay. Yeah, that's a good attitude. They're not behaving properly towards the sentence. Shneimar, like it says in the Torah, Lo tachos enecha uvi'arta dam hanaki. Do not have compassion in your eyes towards him. Now, in general, there's a halakha. If you're in the Sefaria, if you can be, if you're not, I'll read it to you. In the 14th chapter of the laws of Sanhedrin, Rabbeinu Rambam writes that this is separate from a separate halakha. There's a halakha in chapter 14, halakha Gimel. Rabbeinu Rambam writes, Kol mechuyav mitat bedin. Everyone who is obligated, who's liable for the death penalty in bedin, Shelo himitu oto bedin, and the bedin decided not to kill him. Bitelu mitzvat aseh. They held themselves back from fulfilling a mitzvat aseh, an active mitzvah. Velo avru al mitzvah lo ta'aseh, but they don't violate a negative mitzvah. I don't like the word negative mitzvah, but a lo ta'aseh mitzvah. Chutz min ha-mechashef, except for a sorcerer, shim lo hemitu oto, avru al mitzvat lo ta'aseh, shene'emar, mechashefa lo techaye. They didn't buy a sword. Okay, we're not talking about sorcery now. In general, there's a separate prohibition against not killing a person who's liable for the death penalty. So that's chapter 14. In chapter 20, the Rambam is not talking about not killing him. He's talking about showing compassion towards the murderer in any capacity which makes his sentence lighter. Why? You're not allowed to have compassion on a person who doesn't deserve compassion. Rambam continues in chapter 20, Halakha Dalet. V'chen asur levedin lachus al mi shenitchayev kenas. It's forbidden for the bedin to have compassion on a person who is obligated to pay some financial penalty. Shelo yomru, they shouldn't say the bedin, ani hu zeh. This one is a poor person. V'shelo b'chavana asa. He didn't mean to steal, to do wrong, whatever it was that he did wrong. Minastam, we're not stealing. He did something that's liable for a financial penalty. Ela, rather, magbin mimenu kol sheyesh lo belo chanina. We take from him without any compassion. What the court is required to take from him is a financial penalty. Sheneemar, again, like it says, v'lo tachos einecha, your eyes shall not have compassion on him. These are difficult halachot. Our rabbis here are ruling the opposite of how they usually rule. Usually, have compassion, judge favorably, look the right way. But now we're obligated in a completely different direction. Chachamei Israel that are sitting Yoshavin al Midin, they're obligated. Don't have compassion. You can't look the other way. You must be exacting injustice. Look at the third halakha. V'chen b'dinei mamonot. Also in financial crimes. En merachamin al hadal. We don't have compassion on the poor person. Shelo tomar, you shouldn't say the following thing. Ani hu zeh. Look, this person is poor. Uval dino ashir. And the one he owes money to is wealthy. V'ho'il v'ani v'he'ashir chayavin lefarneso. And because both we and the wealthy person have an obligation to take care of poor people financially, azakenu badin, I will let him win this court case. And this way, look what I did. I got the poor person tzedakah. I got the wealthy person to give tzedakah. And better yet, the poor person now received his tzedakah through dignity. He won a court case. He's not that he's getting a handout. He got the money he deserves. We'll take it off his tzedakah paycheck. He got the money he deserved from the person who's supposed to pay him, and he did it with dignity. Just like Robin Hood. Now, there are stories we read children. We don't stop to think about how damaging they are. I'm going to have to stop 1 second just to change a battery. Give me 1 second. You can still hear me? Okay, there are stories we read our children. Tell me a child story. Tell me the story of Goldilocks and the Three Bears. Somebody know the story?
If I may,
Please.
the girl goes wandering, illegally enters somebody else's house, eats their food, sleeps in their bed, and then they come home, and she's the hero.
She's the hero.
The bears, the three bears.
Yeah, the Three Bears. What's the story? The story is you have a girl, illegally enters somebody's home, trespassing, breaking and entering. She eats their food. She drinks their drinks. She complains about it. She complains about their food and their drinks. She sleeps in their bed, all of their beds. They come home. She's the hero of the story. Cute little story. You read the children. One of my rabbis and teachers when I was in Baltimore, Rabbi Yosef Tenner, he used to say that story teaches from a very young age horrible midot to children. You think it's just a nursery story, just a bedtime story. Well, stop making such a big deal. Rabbi, don't be so fanatic. What do you mean don't be so fanatic? What you grow up on, the values that you are taught when you are a child, they're very important. And when you desensitize a child to taking things that don't belong to them, to breaking into people's homes, to sleeping in their beds, and then to make a hero the person who's the aggressor in the story, you are from a very small age perverting the balance of tzedek that's inside of the minds of your young students and children and readers. That can't be something that we're okay with. It sounds fanatic. I'm not picking on your bedtime stories now. But yes.
And I just want to say, for me, and reflecting on it, it's not just about Goldilocks being the hero in the story. It's about I learned that it wasn't okay for me to complain when people violated my boundaries. It wasn't that I felt like I learned from that I should go and violate others' boundaries. I learned I'm not allowed to have boundaries of my own.
Very good. Somebody spoke with me about this in my Kehillat. they were always told that when you have bad guests and they ruin your house, they do things that are not comfortable to you, you shouldn't say anything. It's a mitzvah of achnasat orchim, and that's not okay. That's not an okay story. It's not okay that people are taught that for the sake of a mitzvah, I should suffer. The pasuk says, "Sur mera v'aseh tov," leave evil and do good. Do chesed to people. When do you stop performing acts of kindness for other people? When it begins to hurt you. Most people teach you, no, you should do mitzvah even when it hurts you. No, that's not how this works. To the contrary. The only way I can do aseh tov is if I'm sumira. If it's not damaging my life. There are many people that used to do the mitzvah of achnasat orchim. They had guests, they hosted people, until a bad thing happened. Someone did something wrong to them. And then it closes the door in the face of all the other guests they would have hosted in the future. But who's guilty of their lack of achnasat orchim? It's not them. It's the bad guest. Peleoetz writes about somebody who takes credit. They borrow money from somebody, they don't pay them back. They don't pay them back, and now this person refuses to lend money to anybody else again. So who is the one responsible that now there are people who need a loan and they cannot get a loan? It's not the one, it's not a stingy person who's not loaning money. The one shena'al daltot, the one who locked the gates of tzedakah, is the poor person who took the loan and didn't pay it back. It's not just about you not fulfilling your personal obligations. You've now caused many, many people in the future to not be able to receive tzedakah when they need it. So if I went through all the bedtime stories that have strange messages in them, we'd be here all day. But I didn't come to give a shiur about that. I gave one example to illustrate it. I mentioned another one about stealing from the rich and giving to the poor, and it amazes me that in today's world there are still people who think that's appropriate. That because somebody has more than me, somehow they're guilty because I have less than them. That's not the way the world works. We've created a tremendous amount of angry people who don't have what other people have, and they violate the biblical prohibitions of lo tachamod, not to be jealous of other people. If we have requirements of tzedakah, fine. If we have requirements of chesed, v'chemla, chen, to do good to other people, fine. But to walk around all day with a sense of entitlement that all the people in the world are doing me wrong because they're more successful than me, because they have things I don't have, because they're married to people that I'm not married to, because they have children that are different than mine. All of that anger and resentment that people walk around in the world are because they weren't taught good midot. They were taught horrible midot. And those midot, as they manifest themselves into adults outside of the preschool playground, they're horrible. Sometimes you see a kid, I'm machla, she teaches children, but you see a kid in preschool, and they get a snack in their lunchbox, they just want to share it with all their friends. You know that if HaKadosh Baruch Hu sets this kid's life up in the right way, that they're going to be the same person who, when it comes time for tzedakah, they're busy writing checks to all the Jewish people in the world who need them. They're going to take care of all the charitable organizations, because they had bamba, and they shared their bamba with everybody. The same, I don't know if you can bring bamba to school anymore. Now it has peanuts in it, so I have to, something else, another snack. Beastly, way we bring to school. And then you see the kid who, he has 50 snacks in his lunchbox, because he has a father like me, who's always worried that his kids will go hungry in school. So you pack extra and extra and extra. I rather than bring home food than not have enough at school. But they don't want to give to anybody. You know that this person, no matter how much they have, unless someone helps them learn as a child, that it's okay to let go. You're going to get more snacks tomorrow in your lunchbox. It's okay to let go of something. Then they're never going to let go. You see in general a world of people that don't have midot. They don't have midot. I don't think it's their fault. I don't think most people are bad. I think that we live in a world in which there is nobody left to educate anybody. I'll explain. And forgive me if I'm saying things that you don't, like I said, in this bit of Midrash, you don't always have to agree with me. But I appreciate you giving me the chance to share them. I feel like we live in a world where the role models of religion, So most people used to go to synagogue, church, mosque, somewhere that they used to learn something that was bigger than themselves. So whether it was a correct religion or not doesn't matter to me. But the knowledge that I'm part of a community, I'm part of a faith, I'm part of a nation, I have responsibilities to people beyond myself, and that was something that used to be very, very important. And today you deal in a world of people, it's not that they're godless. I've met many selfish gods in my life. It's they had communities that were bigger than just themselves. And people don't have that anymore. People don't even sit at home for dinner with their families. I was reading an article that in all of the new apartments that they're building, the one room that they're getting rid of is the dining room. Because people don't eat dinner anymore at a dining room table. There are those families who eat dinner at the couch, and those who they make dinner, they put it on the kitchen counter, then everybody comes to get a plate and take it to their room to eat. But if you would have eaten dinner in my house, in our room, my mother would have hung us out to dry with the laundry. But there are families where they don't even sit together. So they're not even aware that in their own family unit, they're responsible for more people beyond themselves. The teachers. Teachers are the most incredible heroes that we have in the world. They're people that don't get paid enough, for sure. They put in energy, and when it was COVID and all the schools were closed and my kids were home, I realized that even though I can't afford to pay my teachers more, but they deserve a raise because what they do, I can never do all day long, all the time. But teachers used to be responsible for more than just teaching your kid about math and science and English and Chumash and Navi and Dinim. They had a bigger job of, by the time you graduate my classroom, I expect for you to be a better person. I want to talk to you about sharing. I want to talk to you about not hitting your friends. I want to talk to you about respecting your parents. I'm going to talk to you about all kinds of things. That's my job. I'm not here just to teach you about mathematics. You could do that on YouTube better than me. I'm here to make you into a person. Today, teachers can't do such a thing. And unfortunately, some of the teachers that are busy teaching children things that are not what they're supposed to be teaching them, they're not good midot. They're worse ideologies and midot. Parents, I don't want to say anything bad about parents, but I was in SeaWorld yesterday with my children. And I sat on the bleachers in some show of people jumping on bicycles. And I looked around the bleachers and I said, Hodu l'Adonai ki tov, ki l'olam chazal. I was with my parents, myself, and my children. I said, I'm very grateful to have parents that are my parents. Because my parents, I can look up to them. I'm looking around the bleachers, and of course I'm judging, so what I'm doing is not correct, but I'm doing it anyways. I'm looking at some of the other parents, and I say, if those were my parents, I can't strive to be great because my parents didn't strive for greatness. I'm looking at people that say, how could you possibly be a role model for somebody? Having children is a very easy thing to do. I'm not going to explain on camera how you do it. It's very easy. But to raise children, to be the kind of person that a child can look up to and say, I want to be like this person. I hope that one day I'm going to be as great as the people who brought me into this world. We have to first grow up and first understand we need to be role models for somebody in the world. And I look around and I say, who do children have as role models? It's not their parents, and it's not their teachers, and it's not their communities. So who do they look up to? And the answer, by the way, who they look up to is horrifying. So I'd rather not tell you who they look up to. But look at the posters on their room. Look at the pictures on their phones. Look at the little videos that they watch. Look. They look up to the only people that step up to the plate to be their role models, and it's not a wonderful world. But there's a whole generation of children that are good. They're good people, and they've been taught that being bad is the right thing to do, that being selfish is the right thing to do, that demanding that they deserve everything in the world by doing nothing for the world is an incredible thing to be. And think about Israeli soldiers. An 18-year-old kid who, in all of his friends around the world, at least the civilized world, they go to university, they gotta go get drunk with their friends at night in the frat house and the sororities, and they gotta go have parties and vacation the world. These kids put on green uniforms and they sit on the borders of our country and they cross those borders and they fight for their lives. And you hear, if you've heard any interview with an Israeli soldier in the last 2 years, and he says, I'm doing it for my country, I'm doing it for my people, I'm doing it for the future of the nation of Israel, I'm doing it for whatever they're doing it for. And he say, look, it's a generation of people. You can't blame religion for it. They're not all religious. You can't blame Jews for it. They're not all Jews. You can't blame, but it's still a place in the world where there are people that were taught there is something greater to live for than myself. Even if I die, I'm still happy that I went. I can't even get people out of their house in this country to go give out food to people in a homeless shelter. They're too busy on TikTok or Instagram or whatever people do nowadays. And here I have 18, 19-year-old kids. I have had kids in the last 2 years. Families calling me, telling me, my kid is not eligible for military draft because of some medical condition. But he's fighting to get drafted anyways. Because he can't sit at home when all of the people in the world are out there fighting. I'm lucky to live as part of a nation that still operates like that. So are you. Back to my halakha. The Beit Din cannot start doing tzedakot. In Yiddish, it's an expression. Forgive me if I butcher Yiddish. I don't speak Yiddish. On yenim's cheshbon. You know that phrase? You can't do chesed on somebody else's account. You can't decide this wealthy person anyways has to give tzedakah. So let me help him lose the court case. So he gives the poor person tzedakah. That is evil, says Rambam. Rather, Torah. About this, the Torah was warning us. Vidal lo tedar berivo. Not to show favoritism to a poor person in his struggle. Shneimar lo tisaf and edal. Not to show favor to a poor person in judgment. And perhaps tied into this last halakha is something a little different. It's not exactly the same as perverting justice itself, but it's close. Asur lehader pnei gadol badin. It is forbidden to show favoritism to an important person in court, in justice. Kitzad, let's say, how? Harei sheba'u lefanecha shenayim ladin. Two of them come to judgment. Echad chacham gadol, v'echad hediot. One of them is a great Talmid Chacham. Another one is not a bad person, just a regular person, not a Talmid Chacham. Lo tagdim lish'ol b'shalmo shel gadol. You're not allowed to inquire as to the well-being of the more important one. V'lo tasbir lo panim. And don't show him, how do you masbir panim? By speaking nicely to that person. Don't speak to him nicely. Don't treat him in a way that is preferential. Even it's not about court. We're not judging anybody yet. We're just saying, hello, how are you? Welcome to court today. You cannot speak nicely to the one who is more important. V'lo tachabedenu, don't honor him. What's the reason you can't do that? The Rambam gives a very unique reason why you can't show this kind of favoritism. And it's different than how other poskim interpret halakha. Say, Rachel, I hear you.
Because the other side will think that there's no point in presenting his case.
Very good. Very good. Rabbeinu Rambam writes, Shelo yistatemu ta'anotav shel ha'acher. Because you don't want the other side to say, look, he likes the other person better than me anyways. I shouldn't even bother trying. There's no chance fighting. It's an uphill battle. I'm doomed to failure. And because of that, they don't fight properly. They don't share their arguments properly. They don't explain their side properly because they assume that the bias is already towards the other person in court. And because of that, they're not going to speak properly. Ela ino nifne le'echad mihen ad shigamer hadin. And therefore, he shouldn't speak to one of them until after the judgment. Shneimar v'lo tedar pnei gadol. From here, though, you can deduce what? What can the judge yes do? Let's say he wants to be respectful to the Talmid Chacham. What can he yes do?
He can be respectful to both of them equally.
Very good. I think I'm not reading too much into the Rambam if I would tell you he could speak to both of them nicely. He could greet both of them warmly, but not one of them over the other one. The whole point here is to show some equality in both sides. If you look in the Sefer Chinuch mentions on all these halachot, all of them, that the logic behind them is that there should be equality in front of the court. All of the people standing in front of the court should be treated as equals. So if you can maintain a semblance of equality while being warm and kind to everybody, then it doesn't violate the law here. But here, when you show favoritism to one, it's not that you're going to pervert justice. You're not doing it. You as the judge, I promise that once we get to the court case, I will examine everything based on the evidence. Yeah, we know that. The problem is, the other person, the other party in court has already given up. They've given up because they saw the one person who they were supposed to trust to be impartial in justice. They saw them being partial towards the other party, and that's going to make them, that will pervert the justice. Yes.
Based on this, do you think that's more support for why it's important that everybody looks the same as far as the quality of dress? I remember a shiur you gave months and months and months back about this, where if somebody comes to court, they can't be wearing prison garb. They have to be dressed in appropriate clothes. Is it perhaps as much for them to feel like they're like an upstanding citizen
Of
as it is for the judge and the others to look at that person and think, oh yeah, you're also worthy of defense?
Of course. That's a good memory. There's a halakha. Unfortunately, in later centuries, we find that the rabbinic courts didn't have the power to uphold it properly. But if one of the people shows up, he's a wealthy man with fancy clothes, we say you can't wear that in court unless you go buy the same clothing for the person opposite you. It can't be the one person is wearing one kind of clothing, the other one is another. And yeah, it's not just the court's feeling towards the people in front of the court, but the people themselves. And when you see the person in the prison garb sitting in court, you know they're guilty. I mean, they're prisoners already in my mind. In their mind, they're sitting there handcuffed to a table, whatever it is. And this is not the proper. It's not the proper way in which we run a court case. At least not when we're trying to be equal and impartial in judgment. Amul Chachamim. Our rabbis say, Al Tomar, don't say Ashir Huzeh. This person is wealthy. Ben Gedolim Huzeh. This person is the child of very important people. He'ach avayeshenu vere bevoshto. How could I embarrass him in court? Lechach ne'emar. About this it says, Velo tedar pene gadol. You cannot show favoritism not towards a greater person either. Don't start making calculations that it's improper for a certain person to be dragged to court. They're too good, they're too important, they're too holy, they're too, no, what? How can we do that to them? How can we do it to their reputation? How can we do it to their family? You hear this a lot. Yeah, that person is a criminal, but we don't want to speak Lashon Hara, it will hurt their family. You heard this before? Okay, you should have thought about that before you became a criminal. At the end of the day, you can't show favoritism. There is an obligation. In rabbinic literature, there's a sentence. It's called Yikov Hadin. Anyone know this phrase? Yikov Hadin et Ahar. The justice has to penetrate the mountain. You go till the end. When it comes to dealing with criminals, we must do that which is right, and that which is right is that which is compassionate. Not all of the other counter thoughts of, I don't want to embarrass, maybe I should help the wealthy person, give the poor person. All of these things, all of these calculations are incorrect calculations. Would you be okay with me opening up Rabbi Chaim David Halevi's actual book, Dvar HaMishpat? I sent you a PDF of it. We haven't yet cracked open this part of the book, but if it's okay with you, I would love for you to open up the PDF. Now, this book is out of print, which is why I've shared with you a PDF of the whole book. It's been out of print for many, many years. I don't see any light at the end of the tunnel, which somebody's going to reprint it. If you open up the PDF, I'm going to Roman numeral page. No, it's not Roman numeral. English numeral page 41. Just a PDF, it should say in Hebrew, Devar HaMishpat. Volume 3, Chelek Gimel. Do you see that attached as a PDF at the end of the Zoom invitation? No, you should have. Yeah, there'll be a chapter 1, of course, but it should be book volume 3. Anyone? No, chapter 1. You're right. That's in the beginning. Look all the way at the end of the Google Classroom Zoom invitation. What's the last file attached there? It's in Hebrew. The whole thing is in Hebrew. It's a PDF. You see it? Click on that one. And then scroll to page 41. Someone tell me that you have it, so I know you know what I'm talking about.
Yes, I see it here.
Okay, בסדר גמור. So page 41 of that PDF. Rabbi Chaim David Halevi mentions what he's creating, and it could be that you don't have to agree with him creating this. An argument between Rabbeinu Moshe ben Maimon, the Rambam, and Rabbi Moshe ben Nachman, the Ramban, regarding showing kindness to criminals in court. At the bottom of page 41, and he leads to this based on a note. A note that the Ramban adds to the Sefer HaMitzvot on Rambam's writing. Says Rabbi Chaim David Halevi at the bottom of page 41, ונראה לעניות דעתי ליישב קושיה זאת בהקדים פירוש דברי רבנו כאן בהלכותיו ובספר המצוות. I want to answer the question I asked above. It's not relevant to us right now. By explaining something in Rabbeinu HaRambam's general understanding of this mitzvah. והנה לשונו בספר המצוות. The Rambam's language in the book of mitzvot, מורה בבירור, shows explicitly שהכוונה היא, the intent behind this law, להזהיר הדיין is to warn the judge, שלא ירחם על ההורג או החובל, that he should not have compassion on the one who is the criminal, ומתוך רחמנות זאת יבוא quote לעשות לו צדקה בעונש. That from his compassion, he will sentence him in a way that is incorrect, meaning a positive way. He'll be more lenient in his sentencing. והמכוון בזה שיפסוק הדין לטובתו. We're saying that he's going to, in the act of judgment, show favoritism somehow to the criminal. But, look at the last line. אבל אם הדיין עשה את המוטל עליו בשלמות. But if the judge has already sentenced the person correctly, ודן את ההורג והחובל כדינם הראוי להם לא רחמים, page 42, and without any compassion, he's already sentenced the murderer, he's already sentenced the person who hurt somebody else, he already took care of the criminal according to the law. ואחר כך, and after he finished the מאלו סיבות, from any other reason, ואפילו מתוך רחמים, even if it's compassion, חונן מי שבידו נכון את ההורג או החובל, he shows some kind of compassion to the criminal now. He helps him with his prison arrangements. He helps the poor person secure funding from the local tzedakah organization. He helps them get into a homeless shelter so they won't have to break into someone's house afterwards. It doesn't take away from their judgment. The judgment is after the judgment, he decides and help them in some way. זה אינו נכלל לשיטת רבנו בלאו דלא תחוס. This is not included in the prohibition, according to the Rambam, of not having compassion. ואף שפירוש זה אינו מוכרח בלשונו, כאן בהלכותיו, and even though I can't tell you that I'm compelled to read this in his language here, אפשר עדיין לפרש כן. It's still possible to explain the Rambam this way. וסייעתה לכך, and my assistance from the text is, says Rabbi Chaim David Halevi, מהמשך דברי רבנו, from the extension of the word רבנו הרמב"ם. He says, the Rambam, וכן בדיני ממונות, in matters of money, we read this halakha together, halakha 4. אין מרחמים על הדל, we don't have compassion on the poor, שלא תאמר, you shouldn't say, אני הוא זה, this person is poor, אל תקנו בדין, I will help him win the court case, ונמצא מתפרנס בכבוד, and he'll get tzedakah in an honorable way. הרי מפורש שהאזהרה זו באה על שעת הדין. This is apparent, therefore, the problem is showing compassion during the court case itself, during sentencing itself. Skip the parentheses. אבל רחמנות שלאחר הדין, but compassion after sentencing, אינה נכללת בלאו זה, is not a problem, and it's not included inside of this prohibition. So what is we saying with the Rambam? The prohibition of having compassion, the murder on them, is only when it's the outcome of the legal trial. But to help them after the trial is over, to show compassion as a judge, as a Talmid Chacham, as a citizen of the Jewish people, and to help this person in whatever capacity you help them, it's not a prohibition. This, though, contradicts that which the Ramban writes, Rabbi Moshe ben Nachman. Aval HaRamban lo ken mefaresh. Rabbi Moshe ben Nachman, he does not agree with this. He doesn't explain this way. V'hu sover, and he's of the opinion, delav, this prohibition, lo al sha'at adin bilvad ne'emar. This is not only said about sentencing, אלא האזהרה היא בלא תעשה מיוחד וערם נוסף ומצוות עשה לקיים בו דינו. כמו מחשבה לא תחיה, וביותר מפורשים הדברים בפירושו לתורה שכתב. The Ramban is obvious that to him this applies even after the sentencing, as you can see inside of his commentary on the Torah. I'm skipping down to the last 4 lines of this paragraph. הרי שכולל לאו זה לדברי הרמב"ן אזהרה שלא להתרשל מפני שום סיבה של העולם שתגרום להצלת הפושע מעונשו, הן מחמת פחד והן מחמת רחמים, וזה שהוסיף הרמב"ן בהשגותיו על מה שהשמיט רבנו. The reason the Ramban he said after not having now
And forgive me, I don't know. I know I learned it from you, but I believe I learned it from you. That you to see, or the judge there to assume that both parties are guilty before sentencing, and that after sentencing, both parties are innocent. That if somebody accepts upon them sentence, they are now, like, yes, they do have to pay. They do have.
but we anyways have to rule out. You can't say I'm not going to we have to pay $750. The guy who's the head of the is a guy in my court funding to help this guy. Whereas I understand the gut feeling, and even my gut feeling is, wow, I'm so lucky to be a student of Rambam. I know, I understand. I want to read to you one more paragraph, which might clarify this a little more. It says Rabbi Chaim de Behavi, Umikan, from here you learn a general rule, even whether you agree with the Ramban doesn't matter. Azhara, society. שיש לדון את פושעי המסוכנים בכל חומר הדין וללא כל רגשות רחמים. We're not talking here about the poor person. We're talking passing. When it comes to them, look at the language of Nachman who says, "Al שלא יוכלו להינצל מעונש בשום אופן." Have to ensure that they are not able to get out of their punishment in any way. ואין חלילה בזה משום אכזריות שאינה מידתה של תורתנו הקדושה. This is not cruel, because it's not the way of the Torah to be cruel. שכל דרכיה דרכי נועם, וכל נתיבותיה שלום. Her ways are pleasant and peaceful. אלא, rather, משום שפושעים מסוכנים אלה, because these dangerous criminals, עצם הרחמנות עליהם, the essence of having compassion towards them, היא אכזריות על רבים חפי פשע אחרים, is cruelty towards the multitudes of innocent people, שעלולים להיפגע על ידם, who will get hurt by them in the future, או על ידי הדומים להם, or by other people who are like them, even if it's not those people, but it's the people who say, the law is not such a big deal, you can get around it. ולכן הקפידה תורה וביער טהרה מקרבך. And that's why the Torah was so particular that you should exterminate the evil from your midst. ובלא תעשה לא תחוס עיניך, והיא עצמה רחמים גדולים על שלמות חיי חברה מתוקנים. And truly, being cruel towards the wicked is the greatest compassion to the innocent members of society who deserve to live in a society where they're not here. I'm not sticking my head now about the judge, but in general, there's and I'm sure the Rambam would also, like we saw elsewhere. And that is when we're dealing with dangerous people that are a menace to society, people that hurt other people that are predators, people that are, you know the word, the people that I'm thinking of. When you show compassion towards them, you are one, emboldening them, you're also enabling the it's not such a big deal. The law is not such a big deal. I once had a lady here in San Diego, not a Jewish lady, tell me that her rapist was let out of prison after 6 months on good behavior. Do you know what it's like for her to walk around the street knowing he knows where she lives, knows what he did to her already? I don't know if somebody would cheat on their taxes, they might find themselves 20. I'm not telling you the guy who cheated taxes is okay. But a person who's a rapist, who's hurt innocent members of society in an irreparable way, and now gets to walk the streets. You did two things. You told him it's okay, you can do it again. He always has another 6 months. Number two, you told all the other evil people in the world that it's okay to be like that guy because nothing's going to happen to you. And number three, you told all the people that walk alone at night, you should be scared. You should be scared. Not going to protect you from the people that are hurting you. And that is devastating. Says Rabbi Chaim David Halevi, you think that the Torah is requiring from the judge to be cruel. It's not true. The Torah is requiring the judge to have compassion on the people and not on the one who's hurting the people. And don't allow your feelings of compassion to be misplaced. Place them in the right place. There's so many beautiful things Rabbi Chaim David Halevi writes here. I can't wait already to finish our introductions so we can get into the writings of Rabbi Chaim David Halevi. So, do I have you for a few more minutes, or should I keep the rest of the halachot for next week? Can I cover one more piece of ground with you tonight? Is it okay with you?
Certainly.
Yeah.
Not going anywhere.
Okay, but let's try this. And I have the sun setting in my face, so if I move off center, you'll know why. So let's look in the source sheet. I brought one more mitzvah from the Sefer Mitzvot. That should be in source. In the Safari source sheet. In source 14. Mitzvat lo ta'aseh, 278. Shelo la'atot mishpat adam chote. Not to pervert judgment against the person who's a sinner, a chote. Shenemar, like it says, lo tateh mishpat evyonecha. Do not pervert the judgment of a poor person. Lamdu mipi shemuah. From what is shemuah? Wow. Let's just say tradition. I'm going to use a word like that because shemuah, Kabbalah, they don't all mean the same thing. Let's pretend for a minute. Our Chachamim teach us sheze evyon b'mitzvot. This is a person who is poor in regard to mitzvot. So what is the Rambam telling us? What does this halakha mean? Who are we talking about? Who is a person who is poor in mitzvot? It can be. Okay, anam haaretz, that's good. Anam haaretz will be poor in mitzvot. He'll be poor in a lot of things. But mitzvot is for sure one of them. Though you can have an am haaretz who's very religious. I know many such people. Yeah, Hasid he is not, but religious he is.
I was thinking of somebody they're poor in mitzvot because they're a prisoner in their own life. They're not free with their time. They're not free to.
So you're already helping me understand why he's poor in mitzvot. I'll ask you what it means though first. What does it mean he's poor in mitzvot?
That he's not doing.
He doesn't observe mitzvot. A person who is not observant of halakha.
He's not able to do that.
No, forget Abel is one. Now you're like machala. You're trying to judge him favorably. First, before you judge him favorably, just tell me who he is. He is a person who, or she is a person who. Examples. They don't observe Shabbat. They don't keep the laws of kashrut. They don't wear tefillin. They don't pray to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. They take interest on their loans. They judge people unfavorably. They a whole bunch of people that could be considered aniyim. They lie. They're serial liars. All kinds of people they have a background in which they're not meticulous about mitzvot. There's a biblical prohibition against treating this person poorly in a rabbinic court of law. The feeling that a person has, they're going to drag me to the Bet Adin. I had a man call me. He married a woman who turned out to be horribly abusive to him. You know, it's interesting. We talk a lot about abuse, and in our mind, there are only certain types of things are considered abusive. Other things are acceptable. She doesn't hit him with baseball bats. This is not how she abused him, but if he was a successful person who thought highly of himself, who was proud of himself, he came out of here crawling on the floor, broken and bruised in his soul in ways that David HaMelech says, only HaKadosh Baruch Hu can heal those kind of wounds. She broke him. She was horrible to him. From the minute she met him, the way that she hurt him and manipulated him, and he had to go to Bedin to give a get. And they called me because he was afraid to go to Bet Adin to give a get. Now, usually, society assumes that a person who doesn't go to the Bet Adin to give a get, he's a bad guy because he's holding back a get. And if you listen to everything you hear today about the withholding of gitin, that's the worst crime could possibly in the world. And I called him to encourage him to go to the Bedin. He went to the Bedin, he gave a get the next day. So, mission accomplished. But what was his fear of going to the Bet Adin? What was he afraid of?
Being her and releasing her to another person.
So you would think that's what he was afraid. That's what a traditional get refuser would be. The problem was that this girl was religious. And he wasn't. And he was terrified that he would come in front of the Bet Adin. And because she's observant and he's not, that they were going to treat him horribly. Because he doesn't have the Jewish credentials, the rabbinic. He doesn't look good in front of the Bedin the way she looks good in front of the Bedin. And I had to reassure him that if a judge follows, I don't know if I'm right. I can't tell you what I think about the Batei Din of 2025. But I had to reassure him that there's a mitzvah in the Torah that even if he considers himself to be a problematic person, I'm not telling you compared to her, I think he's a tzaddik. But they have an obligation to treat him fairly and justly, and Baruch Hashem, the parasha ended without too much drama, more than that. But this is something that we have a biblical obligation, at least a rabbinical obligation, an interpretation of a biblical verse. The Rambam gives a few examples. So back in our chapter 20, in the Mishneh Torah, Laws of Sanhedrin, Rabbeinu Rambam writes halakha number 5, that's source 15 on your paper, on your source sheet. Lo tasu avel b'mishpat. Do not pervert justice. No, I skipped the halakha. Ba'u lefanecha shanayim ledin. Let's say two people come into your court, for judgment. Echad kasher v'echad rasha. One is a kasher Jew, one is a rasha. Al tomar. I was picking on you before, just to pick on you. A kasher and a rasha is worse than a guy who doesn't eat kosher food. It's worse. He has a criminal record to him. There are two people, two defendants in front of the court. One of them is a good citizen. One of them has a criminal record, a long rap sheet. Two of them come to the Bet Adin. Al tomar, don't say, ho'il v'rashahu, because he's a rasha, v'cheskato meshaker. They're different, Rambams have different versions in these two words. Some don't even have these two words. Because he's a rasha, and usually he's a liar. Rashaim lie. V'cheskat zeh she'eno meshane b'diburo. And this one, we know him to be an honest person who tells the truth. Ateh hadin al harasha. I'm going to lean the judgment against the person who's usually a liar. About this it says, Lo tateh mishpat evyonecha berivo. Do not pervert the judgment of an evyon. Af al pi shu evyon b'mitzvot lo tateh dino. Even though you have some kind of religious justification, rationale that you came up with, that you assume that this person, he always lies, he's a bad citizen, he's always in court, always getting in trouble, he's always in trouble with the law, so I'm going to just already now assume he's guilty. That's a separate biblical prohibition. It's another type of perversion of justice, but it's separate because you used his record and his background against him while not listening to the actual merits of the case. Now, this is important for me to note that in chapter 24, the Rambam mentions if the judge thinks the person is lying, then already there are different protocols. Here, he doesn't think the person is lying. He just assumes the person is lying. He's judging him unfavorably because of his background. That is something that is prohibited for the judge to do. In the laws of To'en v'nit'an, plaintiff and defendant, the Rambam has a similar halakha. It's in the same vein. No, it doesn't matter. I'm going to leave those halachot already for next week. Right now, what I'm asking you to walk away from this shiur with. Next week's shiur is going to be all about whether the end justifies the means. If I know the person is guilty, but I don't have evidence that they're guilty, can I create evidence to make them guilty? In English, you might call that planting evidence. There definitely are many cases you put in planting evidence, you'll find in your search. This unfortunately happens too often. But I'm not talking just about that. I'm talking about there are legal mechanisms which the judge can use to intimidate the person into being guilty, into admitting guilt. But it's good because the end justified the means. I got another criminal off the street. Is that really the case? That's next week's shiur. For right now, I'm talking about something completely different. For right now, I'm summarizing today's shiur in that we are all obligated to know how to balance our emotions. We're not robots. The Torah is aware that we're not robots. We have feelings. And those feelings, they often decide for us what we do and what we think and how we deal with people and situations. And there are times that we have good feelings. We have midat harachamim. We have compassion towards people. And that causes us to do irrational things, like give away money from our paycheck to a person who didn't work. That's an incredible thing. To go visit a sick person who hasn't seen me in 3 years because they can't get out of bed, so I don't owe them a visit. But I say, no, my Torah requires me to be a good person, to care about this person more than the one who visits me regularly and who brings me flowers for Shabbat, and that's the person I need to go visit them. Those are incredible feelings that we have. But sometimes there are feelings of compassion that we have that are misplaced. And we live in a society, I cannot help but say this, that we live in a society where misplaced compassion seems to be everywhere. Everywhere. We've been hearing for the last 2 years almost that nobody is sure if the people with the green bandanas in Arabic and face coverings who murdered babies, we're not sure if they're terrorists or they're really freedom fighters. One man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. We're not sure. We're not sure if people that are bad are really bad or they're really good people. Maybe they're the heroes of society. You've heard names of tyrants in history. How many people suffered from Stalin? Only to hear that there are people that adore Stalin. They think he was an incredible hero for humanity, that he's the type of person that we should emulate in leadership. You hear crazy things, and you look at the person and you hear them make an argument, and the argument is compassion. You hear someone tell you, my parents were Holocaust survivors. It's why I will never allow my Jewish brothers and sisters to commit a genocide. My dear friend, I heard you in the first half of your sentence. You're a person who has tremendous compassion. But now you're applying your compassion incorrectly to the wrong place. There are criminals that murder people, that are sitting in prison. I think it's time they should all go home to bake cookies with their family. I don't know if I want murderers running around the streets baking cookies with their family. Because usually murderers don't use their knives to cut birthday cakes. Usually they're using their knives to kill people. And when I am compassionate on the wrong people, I end up being cruel to the people who deserve my compassion. As judges, as leaders, even in a family. Most of us are not judges. Not all of us are sitting on Batei Din, myself included, not in these kind of matters. I sometimes look at the eyes of my children, or even in the Kehillat, you see this, but let's talk about families. You sometimes see that when you fail to stand up for one of your children, even inside a brother is bullying a sister is bullying a brother, and they see that the parent didn't take the right step to protect them, the hope falls out of their face. Because the only person that they relied on to save them from their suffering of what's the suffering? Let's don't exaggerate. The suffering is who took the remote control for the TV, or who knocked over my Lego from the table. And I'm not talking here about crimes against humanity, okay? But the fact that I came to tell you that somebody knocked my Lego off the table and you didn't do anything about it, it makes me feel like I can't trust the system, the parents that are supposed to be there taking care of me to do what's right. And that hopelessness, it's a horrible place to put somebody in. The other night, my wife and I had a conversation that if a child gets in trouble too much every day, maybe you should just stop getting it. Like at 5 times, stop. Let them off the hook. Yeah, you could let a child off the hook, assuming there are no victims to their crimes. But if there are victims to their crimes, and I'm using the word crimes very, very lightly, then you're doing a disservice to the other person who's being hurt. You might have to change strategies. Maybe you don't get them in trouble. Maybe there's another proactive measure that you take when it comes to parenting to help this child not get in trouble. About that, I'm not speaking. But on your account, you can do all kinds of things. On the other person's account, you can't have compassion on account of other people. You can't steal money from the rich and give it to the poor. You can't force people to lose court cases in order to fund other people's evil need or entitlement. You can't do that. As a judge, the feelings of compassion in your heart must be restrained, they must be tamed, and they must be applied to the right situation in the right place. And I want to say that the Rambam and the Ramban are right. I would love to know of a world where after sentencing, the Rambam's judge comes out and takes care of the person and helps them to the capacity with which we as human beings can help each other. I would love to see a world like the Ramban, where the citizens in the street recognize that our judges take care of all the people, also the bad ones, but primarily the good ones. And I don't have to worry that because of the feelings of compassion that are in the heart of my leaders, that I'm now going to suffer from it. This applies to all kinds of situations. I'm intentionally avoiding current politics and events that exist in the world aside from Israel. I tell you that I avoid politics and I speak about Israel. Then people write me messages, how come you mentioned Israel in your class today? It offended me that you said something positive about the Israeli Defense Forces. Don't worry, nobody in this class. Online, they get messages from YouTube. And for me, Israel is not politics, and the Israeli Defense Forces are not politicians. And this is a very existential battle that we are in for all the Jewish people, you and me and my families and your families and our children being able to walk down the street safely. And I don't find that to be a matter of politics, but greater questions, greater dilemmas that are in the world. Maybe if I can leave you with a food for thought, I'm going to end the shiur, and I'm going to do something I don't usually do. I'm going to say something off camera, and then I'm going to take questions and answers, but not about that. I just don't want to record what I'm about to say. So thank you for learning with me.